Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenhorn. They came unto him, the Sadducees, who say that there's no resurrection. And they asked him, saying, Master, Moses wrote unto us, saying, if a man's brother die, leaving his wife behind, having no children, the brother should take the wife and raise up seed unto his brother. Now, therefore, there were 7 brothers. First, having taken a wife, died, leaving no children behind. So the second, he took her also and died, childless. And so did the third. Last of all 7 had her, died, leaving no children. Last of all, the woman died also. Tell us therefore in the resurrection, when they shall rise, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all took her to wife. So here we see a really, wise question being asked concerning the dead in the next life. We know that in this life that we're given as, man and wife, as given from the Garden of Eden, for this cause shall a man, leave his mother and father, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall become one flesh, so that they are no more twain but one. So, things are coming, like I said in one of my videos, and I keep emphasizing a lot of these things, we don't know. We don't know the answers to these things. And here is Jesus coming, knowing all things from the beginning to the end, knowing how the next life will be like, how to get there, what's important in the kingdom of God, what God actually is looking for, what makes him upset, what are the things that we do that we think are so great that, causes God, to turn his back onto us. What are the things that are good? What are the things that are maybe, not so good that we need to get rid of? It's a really good question if you think about it. But here's a drawback though. It's the means, for which they ask this question. Because you see, these men, these Sadducees, they believe that there's no resurrection. When you die, that's the end of it. Nothing. There's no next life. There's nothing. In the New Testament, we'll see when they took Paul, captive. He actually used this knowledge to his benefit. Because half of the room, they were Pharisees, on the other half, they were Sadducees. And it was said that, the Sadducees were there, which believed neither in spirit, nor angel, nor in life after the next life. While the Pharisees, they confessed both. So Paul, when he stood up, he actually, gave this speech. Yeah, so Paul, when he stood up, he actually gave this speech, saying that, being called in. And he mentioned something about the resurrection of the dead. And then there was an uproar because the Sadducees, they began to say that, these things are not true. But then the Pharisees, they began to, argue. And then, so he kind of got them against each other. So, like I said, it's a great question. And it's actually something that we needed answers. So thank God they did ask this question and we got the answer. But, they did it to entrap him, right? That was the whole thing. So you must understand just how low these men are stooping right now. Stooping to the point where we're willing to confess things that we absolutely don't believe in. We're willing to go down avenues that compromise the very fiber of what we stand for and who we are. In life, there are certain things that should never be touched. As a man, all we have is our honor and our word, things that we believe in, the things that we hold true. Now, this being at the cornerstone of their doctrine and them willing, to throw it out there, to entrap somebody, so unjustly, to entrap the Messiah, to entrap someone that has given nothing but, giving back to the people in all the healings, the casting out of devils, everything that he's done, the teachings, like I said, the story of Lazarus and the rich man that, he died. Both of them ended up in, the rich man went to hell. Lazarus was carried by the angel into Abraham's bosom. When he got there, he realized that, I just not understand how I was living was completely wrong. I have 7 brothers that they're all coming here if they continue on the path that they're on. Please, God, send somebody back to speak unto them so that they end up not in this place. So here we have really revelations of the truth. So like I said, thank God they asked the question, so we got the answer. And, I'm sorry about how these answers came. Them trying to entrap him, telling all these lies, how he must have felt. One thing we don't consider is how Jesus must have felt to be rejected by the very people that he came. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. The whole world he loved, not just the Jews. But we would see that it would take a process. There was a strategy in how the Gentiles, which are the non-Jews, pretty much the whole other world, would be incorporated into God's plan, right? So, in this whole, exchange between Jesus and these men, right now he's in, they're coming at him. We just literally saw where they argued, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? And immediately before these Sadducees came, we saw, the Pharisees coming onto him asking, is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar? And I argued yesterday, that was yesterday's video, how if he had said yes or no, both answers could have gotten him in so much trouble. Because if he said no, then now he's in trouble with Caesar. Now he's, encouraging uproar, revolt, and rebellion. And this is how these men, they make their money, is by these taxes. You ever seen a king eat? You see how many meats at his table. You see the pork, you see the beef, the chicken, fish, the shrimp. You see the grapes and all these fruits. These beans and rice and all these things at their table. You see how kings eat. And this is how they pay for it, right? If he had said, and that's if he had said, no, do not pay unto Caesar. But if he did say yes, then they could accuse him of, what kind of man are you, encouraging us to pay, tribute to Caesar when he does nothing but oppress the people. You should be just speaking for God and His name. So no matter what he said, he would have got in trouble. Right before that, he gave the parable of the sower that planted the vineyard to a journey into a far country, sending unto the husbandman, his servant that he might receive of the fruit of the vineyard. Them beating them killing them, stoning some. That's why he sent his son, saying that they will reverence him. They killed the son. Then he asked a question: what shall the Lord of the vineyard do unto these men? And the answer was that he shall destroy these men and let the vineyard out unto others. The behold, stone which the builders rejected, the same as to become the head of the corner. They understanding that he spoke this parable against them, they left angrily. And that's when we saw, right, then came after that, is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar or not? Them being astonished. And then right after that, we have this another, thing to trap him. These Sadducees which believe in no resurrection. So we see these seven brothers, having this wife. Everybody died, leaving no children. That's about the woman dying also. So then, asking this question, whose wife shall she be? And that's a very good, interesting question, because it's gonna answer many questions. It's gonna give us the answer to many questions that we didn't even know we should be asking, right? And like I said, I really do, admire the depth of this question. But what is it showing about these men and their character? What about character? What about your name? What about your reputation? What about your honor? These things, they follow you in life. They say in life, you attract who you are. You want to attract great things onto yourself. That's why self-help is so important and it's so useful, self-help, because it gives us the tools to go in there. They say that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then you will see each problem as a nail. The only thing to be beaten in. Imagine the only tool you have is a hammer and you need a screwdriver. Imagine the only tool you have is a hammer. You need scissors or pliers, or you need, like, those ratchet heads. You need a adjustable wrench. But the only thing you have is a hammer. How is that job gonna look? And a lot of us are like that. And things like that, happen unto us because, whether we realize it or not, all we have is that hammer. And it's really usually just to take a step back and hope the problem goes away. If I was to, from my expert, opinion and wisdom, the tool that I see people having is that they step back and then they look at it and hope it goes away. Or they'll, like, maybe use anger and try to intimidate it away. Try to intimidate their way through it. But what I like to say? I like to say that 2 plus 2 is 4, no matter how you feel. You see, whatever's going on in the background, it's going to be your truth. It's going to remain truth and it's going to remain there. No matter if you're upset at it, if you try to curse at it, if you're happy at it, it's going to be the same. I've seen people that, they have issues and, the way they deal with it is to gaslight. That's a new term that we've had over maybe the past couple of years. Gaslight and try to be so overly self-assertive, while never really putting their hands to the wheel, so to speak, to deal with this problem, to take it apart, to look at it as individual pieces. We see self-help, it really opens up your mind to so many avenues of thinking. It shows you that the neighborhood that you live in is not just one road, because maybe that's all one road that you take to work every day. Maybe the supermarket is on the way and then you come home. But it shows you that, hey, look, there's so many different roads that you can take. There's this back road, there's this side road, there's a freeway, there's a highway right there. There's this shortcut. It can even show you a way where there's maybe a bicycle path or a path to walk, right? But then the only thing that you ever seen, is this one road that you think that you know. The only road, the only way that you know. So self-help, I would say it get down to the nitty-gritty of the things that happen in between our jumps. Imagine that, you moving about in your life, being effective, solving problems, getting to the next level, setting goals and achieving them. Just going after great things, being about great things, being honorable. Imagine that, you're like a frog, jumping on lily pads. Some frogs are small enough they can jump from lily pad that's really, in a water, so to speak, where they can stay on the surface. Self-development, when you're jumping from one lily pad to another, you realize that you're passing through something. Self-development, it gives you the eyes to see what that thing is. It gives you to see not only what it is, but how it works, how it has been working against you so far in your life. What it looks like for to get it to work in your favor. Imagine every lily pad that you're jumping, there's actually something that you're jumping through. Now, you being blinded so far and so much, you're just making these jumps and you're just jumping from lily pad to lily pad, maybe getting by, on good luck. You jump through this thing, you encounter it, you maybe be successful with it, maybe not, but you're really just getting lucky at this point. Anything that happens is by luck. Now, imagine the self-developed mind who he can see these things. So instead of jumping randomly from, lily pad to lily pad, imagine being more selective. Imagine being proactive that, I see this lily pad in front of me. But the thing I'm trying to achieve, If I do that, it's gonna work against me. Instead of jumping in the lily pad in front of me, I actually need to turn to the left or the right, or even turn around behind me. And one of these ones are gonna be the one that's gonna get me to where I'm looking to go. He's gonna let me avoid, the dishonor of doing something, dishonorable and disreputable, something dishonest. So self-help, it opens your mind and it shows you that there's so many more things that make up this thing than you are willing to, admit. And that's the reason why failures give you more, wisdom than success. Because when you succeed, you tend to close the book and move on to the next level, right? You never stick around to question why things work. It's just one thing leading to another, and it's almost like you had no say in these things. But failures, no, failures. You're stuck with a broken, device, and now you're forced to look at that thing. And usually you end up taking things apart, right? And you look at all the components. So now you're trying to find why this thing failed. And since because you didn't know, you don't have the wisdom to know which one did, which piece is malfunctioning, or which piece is causing, this failure, then you have to look at all pieces, right? So now you get to learn each component in depth more at a deeper level, because you want to see how they work, how they affect each other, how they bounce off each other. Studying these individual components now, it gives you a greater understanding of what it is that you're working with. It opens up your mind. So see, not only when the success comes, you're gonna know why it comes. You're gonna know which pieces were stopping it from coming in the first place. And see, now because you have such a deeper knowledge of all the components, now you're able to improve on the components, possibly giving a greater outcome, making it be smaller, making it be better, more efficient. It takes less to make it operate, and it operates at a greater efficiency, and it accomplishes greater things. If you look at self-development, so many pieces to it. I could just name a few. How money works. The difference between someone that accumulates wealth versus someone who doesn't. Someone who, how they look at their money. Are they looking at, new Jordans when they get paid? Or are they looking at stocks? Are they looking at, how much can I put in this thing to get a return? It's understanding how different between, just the general mindset of somebody who is a go-getter versus somebody who just sits around. What are they thinking about? They wake up, they just think about food, and they watch TV. They just sit around, playing video games, hang out with friends, versus the person who's a go-getter. I mean, they have to get up, they have to go, check this out, how much this costs, to see, how much I can get, how much capital I can get together to invest on this thing, see if I can get my foot in the door with these investors. I probably won't have as much to put as they do. See if I can get, things together to go and purchase this piece of land. Is you see the difference in their minds, how they think, not a, point of self-development. How do you handle losses? Do you sit around and just, mope? Do you bounce, bounce back so quick? It's as if it didn't even happen. You're juggling so many things. So these Sadducees, they come, unto Jesus, asking this question, using the law of Moses. If a man's brother, if he dies, leaving the wife childless, it's up to the brother to raise up seed unto his brother, so that the name doesn't get erased. Now, this was given by Moses. This was actually when they were traveling through the wilderness and they didn't even make it into the promised land yet. This was one of the statutes that was given, so that no man's name would be erased from Israel. Even though the child, it would technically be his, but it would stand in the gap for his brother so that his name is not lost. And there was actually a story where we saw, this, in a negative outcome. There was the tribe of Judah. Judah is where, David came from, where Jesus came from. So he went down to Canaan, I believe it was. He met this lady. She gave him two sons. The first one was the second one was Onan. Now the Bible says that was wicked, and the Lord slew him. The Lord actually slew him. He was so wicked. We don't really hear of things like that in the Bible. Usually God, he will make a man, just run his course. Usually whatever he's getting himself into, that's going to take him out, or something's going to come and get him. But the Lord actually, he displeased him so much, the Lord slew him. No, he didn't say how he did it. Did he run upon him directly? Did he cause a lion? Did he cause men, travelers to do something to him? It just said that he slew him. So his brother Onan, he had his wife and he had no children. So now the brother Onan was supposed to go in and, this passage is saying, raise up seed unto his brother. But when the time came, he spilt it on the floor, and the Lord was displeased with that, and he slew the brother also. So both of them got slayed by the Lord. So now he had a third son, and this lady, she was told to go to her father's house and remain a widow, and when the son was grown, he would be given unto her. But when the time came, he was not. So she came down to see what was going on, and she pretended to be a harlot, by the way. And when, Judah saw her, he went in unto her. This was his son's wife. Remember, she was Er's wife first, and then Onan. Both of them died. So then afterwards, she was pregnant. But, when he went in unto her, she asked for a token because, he didn't pay her. He was going to give her a kid from the flock, a goat or a sheep, whatever it would have been. So she held his staff and his ring, but then she disappeared. And, he was ashamed, lest people find out what happened. But so it came to pass a couple months after this that it was told him that, the daughter-in-law, I believe her name was Tamar, was it not? She had played the harlot and now she's pregnant. And, he was getting ready to have them burn her. He said, bring her forth, let her be burnt. Then when they came onto her, she said, I am with child by the man whose ring and whose staff is this. And he realized that it was his. And he could do nothing unto her, so he let her go. So this brother, he was supposed to raise up seed, but when he saw that it wouldn't have been his, he did not. He spilled it on the floor. And God slew him also, because he had slew the firstborn, because he was wicked. It just said he was wicked, that's all. So this story, it shows, all 7 brothers having this woman. First took her, he died, no children. Left her to the brother to raise up, seed unto the first one. He died also, leaving no seed. So now the third one. All right, so now my question is this. By the time we get to number 7, right? So now, does he have to raise up now 6 seed unto these 6 brothers that died? How does that work? Or is he just raising up? So we're at the 7th brother. So are we just raising up for the 6th? Do we forget about brother 1 to 5? Is it just for the last one, or the last 2, or the last 3? Is there a limit on this rule? That question, it was not answered. Are we to give her 6 kids, naming them after the 6 deceased brothers? But then, my question is, how is this lady so unlucky to be with these 6 brothers? And I'm sure they were with her for at least a year or whatever period of time. And, trying year after year after year, having no children, then you could ask the question that maybe something was wrong with, there's many reasons for infertility, but, and, some of it, I guess, it could run in the DNA, just like a mule is, if a horse and I believe it's a donkey get together and they make a mule, and that mule is unable to have children, right? Was this something similar, for humans? Did they have a defect? The father, he was allowed to, reproduce, but then, his children will have, such a hard time. No disease combined that causes that. See, Abraham's wife, Sarah, she was barren. So was his son's wife, Rebecca, Isaac's wife. But difference that he prayed unto the Lord and he opened her womb like immediately. We know that, Jacob, he loved Rachel, and she was barren. All right, so let's get into these scriptures. It starts out saying, Then come unto him the Sadducees, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him, saying, all right, so the Sadducees, we've seen Pharisees take their, shot at him. We've seen the chief priests and the elders. We've seen them come in teams. We've seen the chief priests and the elders and the Pharisees come together at once. We've seen the chief priests and the elders come, together. We've seen the Pharisees and the chief priests come together. But we haven't seen the Sadducees so far. I'm not that much of a scholar to tell you the difference between them. I probably do need to do some, research on that at some point. But the emphasis is made here on the fact that these men believe that there is no resurrection. Now, each division, let's call them divisions. Each division, talking about the chief priests, elders, scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, each division, they each had the errors that they believed in. I know it's easy to look at them and say, well, if there's no resurrection, then what do you? Why believe in anything spiritual? Why believe in anything religious? Why believe in anything of faith if you just die and then that's the end of it? If that's the end of it, then, why make sacrifices? Sacrifices are made so that you deny yourself, pleasure instantly, for a greater reward later. It's investing your time, investing your resources, investing yourself, and things of faith, things of believing, things of God. They're all investments. They're all sacrifices because, we are human beings and we do have an animal nature, right? What's the point in, resisting the animal nature to just go out, be with as many, sexual partners, go out and just pursue pleasure, do certain things, live a fast life, so to speak. What's the point of holding back, investing in honor, in dignity, in character, in virtue? Because these are all the things that come with pursuing, the Lord, pursuing a higher calling, a higher existence. If you're a Sadducee and there's no resurrection, then one can see how, why would you, invest? Why would you deny yourself for a reward that's supposed to come? Because that's really what, anything of faith or spirituality is about. Is denying yourself instant pleasures for a greater spiritual reward later. So then one could ask the question, if there's no resurrection, then what form, because there's got to be a form where they get, paid for the sacrifices that they make. There's got to be a form, because otherwise, then why believe anything that they believe? Why do anything that they do? All right, so the next one says, so they come unto him saying, Master, Moses wrote unto us saying, if a man's brother die, leaving his wife behind, having no children, that his brother should take up his wife and raise up seed unto him. So heading right to the law of Moses. What was there in the book of faith? We know that the Old Testament was the scribes and Pharisees and the chief priests and elders. That's what they taught from. That's where they got even, their traditions, such as the washing of pots, cups, plates, and vessels. These were all given, in the Old Testament, the days of Moses and Joshua and these, but it wasn't emphasized the way that they do it. They didn't lose the meaning and then overemphasize it above, other things, even such as the taking care of the poor and needy and all the things that they were doing. So this was a remnant from the law of Moses. Was the Old Testament, was that their book? Or were they also adding a second layer of deception here? Because we already don't believe in the resurrection, right? So now are we quoting the law of Moses when we don't even, operate by that? We don't even go by that. Is that what we're doing right now? So Moses wrote unto us. The next time we would see this is when they brought the woman taken in adultery. Moses wrote unto us, right? Do we stone her or not? So if a man's brother, die, leaving his wife behind, with no children. All right, so this was a duty, of a brother, when he passed, leaving no children. Because then if he left if he left a child, then that child would carry on the name. And then I believe the woman, she would be free to go with whosoever she wants. But him having no children, the brother, he has to raise up seed unto him, because they're gonna be of a similar genetic makeup, than let's say a stranger would be. Then I guess if the brother, if he was an only child or only female, he had only sisters, then that, I guess that would be the end of it. It doesn't really say where he would go to a cousin or even his father or anybody else. It even says in the Old Testament, if the man was unwilling to do this, then they would take him up to the elders. She would spit in his face and then loose his shoe off his foot. And he would be known as him that had his shoe loosed in Israel. It was a disrespectful term. Yeah, he that had his shoe, the house of he that had his shoe looseth. So there was dishonor in this thing if he refused to perform this. Like I said, Judah, remember, this was the original 12 children of, Israel, Jacob. So we wouldn't see, remember, Moses until we went down into Egypt, right? So we hadn't even gotten to Egypt yet, for these laws to be given. So it wasn't given as yet, because he could have said no, and then I guess his, and Onan, the two brothers I'm telling you about, and then Onan would have had his shoe loosed, and then she would have spit in his face if he didn't want to do it. But that wasn't given as yet. All right, so obviously, if he didn't have any brother, so there would be nothing that could be done. The woman, she would be free to go where she wanted. So this was a statute. So then the next one says, now therefore there were 7 brethren, the first of whom took a wife, died, leaving her childless, and gave her unto his brother. So we're establishing, a construct right here. We're putting the pieces together, reasoning in 3D inside our mind. So we have a law from Moses. We have something being tested in this life and the next. A man dying childless. When they rise, whose wife shall she be? Even though we ourselves do not believe in the resurrection. So there were 7 brothers, even though it could have just been 2, because I mean, but we wanna emphasize, multiple marriages here. There was a law given that if a man marry a wife and they get divorced and she go and be married to another, and even if that husband dies and passes away, she cannot come back to her first husband. Maybe they could have intertwined, that statute with this within this question. So the first one, he took her, he died, childless. So the next one says, then the second, he took her and likewise died childless, leaving her unto the third. That story about Judah and his 3 sons, Onan, and then the little one, I forget what his name was. But he was born like way after they were. So by the time she was asking for a husband, he was just a little child, like a little baby. They told her to wait at the house until he be grown, that he would be given. But you know how, and rightfully so, how people are. That would be like an arranged marriage. How many people are excited to be in an arranged marriage, right? Someone here, we're telling you have to be with this person because of some, ridiculous reason. I've seen, so many little girls, a 6-year-old girl, even be sold into an arranged marriage to pay a debt, less than $1,000 American. Less than $1,000 American. This 6-year-old girl was sold to the neighbor that they owed the money to, and she became, his wife, crying all the way there. So, when he became of age, they probably told him about it, and he, it does not say that they did, but I imagine if they did, how he would have refused. Because, both brothers died because of her. Well, not really because of her, but they both died with her. I mean, that doesn't sound so good. What if I go and I lose my life also? What if there's something that's following her? So when she saw that she wasn't given, she came and she laid in wait and got pregnant by the father. So she finally got the seed that she was looking for. So then the next one says, and last of all, the seven died, leaving no children. Last of all, the woman died also. So I mean, what a sequence of events. Watching all seven brothers die. At some point, do we not start asking questions? At some point, do we not start getting concerned? These brothers, did they take other wives? We know in those days a man was allowed to have multiple wives. Did they have other wives? And if they did they have children, by these other women? How the wives must have looked at this lady. Like, especially when you got to like number 5 or number 6, it's like, so she was with your 4 brothers, they all died. I know she wants to come in here. Women, they're the ones that, one thing I respect about women, they're so keen on things of principle. Women are the emotional ones, and we know that we can admit that because they respond to things of emotions, so strongly. But I've never seen anybody that's able to identify principles in a thing more than a woman. I often say, if your wife has something to say about it, listen to her because she's probably right. I don't know, women, they just have this sense that things of principle. I can imagine how she was looking at this lady saying, you just had, when they reached number 7, you just had 6 brothers married to this lady and they all died, no children. Something's up, something is wrong with this lady. Even though, the men might have been saying the same thing, but I can see how he would have been more concerned and be trying to help. Be concerned and trying to help. That's how I would see, the brothers, responding in this situation. Or maybe not. Maybe they were just as concerned. But I guarantee you that this wife, if there was another one, she was looking at this girl, possibly even calling her bad luck. I mean, and who could argue, right? All right, so the next one says, therefore in the resurrection, when they shall rise from the dead, whose wife shall she be of the 7 brothers? For they all had her to wife. So now, like I said, we give thanks for this question. And you see, if they were going to give us, questions like this, then maybe they could have asked him more things. Maybe they did, and maybe it just wasn't recorded. But here we have the master, and, he's really showing us things that we weren't ready to even be asking about. And that's a drawback with what came, the circumstances under which, Jesus walked this earth. In that he was there having all ultimate wisdom, having all the answers, and we weren't ready to be asking any questions. Having all the answers and we weren't ready to be asking any questions. Ultimately with this question, did they achieve the effect that they were trying to achieve? Because here he is giving them an answer about the resurrection, and they don't believe in the resurrection, right? Are they not going to accuse him of believing in the resurrection? Everybody else does. I'm grateful for the question because it gave us such a great answer. But I just don't see how this benefited them. Because you're going to go and ask a question, contradicts principles of what your faith stands on. So you're ultimately selling yourself out, right? Train your own self. And now you get this answer. And what are you going to do with it? Like I said, we are grateful for this answer, right? How did this benefit them? So all 7 had her. Who gets to claim her? Is it the first one or is it the last one? Usually, those would be the first 2 that you would look at. The first one that married her or the last one that had her. You see anything besides that, you could maybe ask, maybe the one who loved her the most or who she loved the most. Maybe she gets a choice, right? I am Straw Greenhorn.